Ni hao, konnichiwa, shalom, ciao, bonjour, namaste, ciao.
Bienvenidos! Hey, my name is Jedley. This is Reading with Your Kids. We are beaming out to you and the entire planet from the beautiful, historical, book-loving neighborhood of Reedville, the loveliest neighborhood in all of Boston. Here at Reading with Your Kids, our mission is simple but powerful, to bring families together through the shared magic of books and stories. In every episode, we sit down with fascinating folks who are creating books that open hearts and spark imaginations. We would love it if you could help us expand our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pod, Amazon Music, YouTube, Audible, Player FM, CastBox. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. Really wonderful show for you today. First up, Jen De Oliveira is here to celebrate her new graphic novel for young people, Pips and Pals, Otter Space. Later in the show, Melanie Paget will be here to celebrate Aiken's River Rat, great new middle grade novel. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Fart Boy and Reeky Dog, Dino Doom. Fantastic new graphic novel written by New York Times bestselling author Joan Holub, who's written over 200 amazing books for kids. It's school sleepover at the museum. What could go wrong? Well, how about this? A snack-fueled explosion of garbanzo beans and peanuts unleashes a stink so powerful it brings the dinosaurs back to life. Now, Fart Boy, Reeky Dog, and their friends are in the middle of a dino-sized disaster. They have to solve tricky riddles, find missing bones, and stop the stinkiest villain of all, Professor Gravy Pants. Because if they don't, the dinosaurs could take over. Or worse, they could become Dino Dinner. This action-packed graphic novel is bursting with friendships, adventure, and enough laughs to shake the museum walls. If your kids love superheroes, if they love dinosaurs, and if they love to laugh until they can't breathe, then Fart Boy and Reeky Dog Dino Doom is the book for you. Because sometimes the power to save the world comes from the unlikeliest place. Grab your copy today and get ready for a reading adventure that's truly dynamite. Hey, this is a message for all the authors that are listening. You know, you worked hard on your book. You spent months, maybe years, writing, revising, dreaming, and believing. You created characters, solved problems, overcame doubts, and brought a story into the world that only you could tell. Now it's time to help readers discover it. The Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program was created to celebrate outstanding children's books and to help authors reach more families. When a book earns our seal of approval, we don't stop with an award certificate. We review the book, feature it on the podcast, share it across social media, and help introduce it to parents, teachers, librarians, and caregivers who are looking for great books to share with kids. Because your story matters. And the families who need your story deserve a chance to find it. Please visit readingwithyourkids.com and click the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to learn more. That's readingwithyourkids.com. Let your book find the readers it was written for. Joining us once again from the great state of California, our guest is returning to Reading with Your Kids to celebrate her new early reader graphic novel. It's called Pip and Pals, Otter Space. Please welcome to the show, Jen De Oliveira. Jen, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for inviting me back. It's great to chat with you again.
So happy to have you back. What a clever name, or what a clever title. Otter Space. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something that I don't think I made up. I think that phrase has been out there, but it's something that stuck with me when I was creating the character of Pip, who's a river otter. And initially her story did not start off as Otter Space. It started with a very different journey, but I think Otter Space just stuck with me. I thought it'd be fun for kids to say, and things just kind of went from there.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tell us the original dream of it when you started creating it?
Yeah, Pip took on so many different iterations. When I first created the character, she was part of a trio. She was like the baby of two other Otter siblings. And then my editor, Esther Hernandez, said, something's not quite clicking with that story, but she really liked Pip. So I took Pip and then, Pip, I thought, oh, Pip and her pop. So she had a dad who was like a fix-it-up type of otter, and she wanted to be like him and had an imagination creating things. And then that led to Pip using her imagination to take these adventures. And initially when I was starting to work on this book, it was her going on this kind of silly pirate quest with her friends to find this missing trinket. And then it just wasn't quite working. And my editor Esther said, like, do you think we could kind of like rework this? Do you think there's more that can be done here? And so of course I went into panic mode thinking like, oh no, I have no idea what I'm doing. But Otter Space just kept sticking with me. And I felt like kids are really going to like saying Otter Space. There's something really silly about it. And so, yeah, so that turned into Pip. And this story, Pip, suddenly emerges green from the water. She goes for a swim and then suddenly her brown fur is green. And her best friend TJ, who's a little tern bird, who loves reading sci-fi comics, concludes, oh, you must be from Otter Space. You must be an alien. And he's so excited about that. And she sort of gets on board with that and questions like, is she a space otter or what's going on? So yeah, it's definitely a case of mistaken identity. And I think it'll be really fun and silly for kids to follow along with Pip.
What's it like as you're creating the story and you're bringing and sharing ideas with your editor, and you're developing a story and characters and you love them, and then you bring them to the editor and the editor's like, yeah, it ain't working for me. Try again. I imagine if I had hair, I'd be pulling my hair out.
A little bit. I've been lucky to work with Esther. I worked with her on my previous series, Reggie. She was the acquiring editor for that. And I'm really lucky to have a great relationship with her where she challenges me and kind of pushes me. And even when I'm doubting, like, do I know what I'm doing? Can I do it? She's like, you can do it. You'll figure it out. And then for me, I think it's just kind of literally going back to the drawing board, going back to my sketchbook and playing around and making the characters talk and do things. And then these little pieces will start to come together. But initially, yeah, it's very like, I get in a panic, like, oh no, how am I going to figure this out?
Yeah, I've never been a fan of people saying, that doesn't work. You'll figure it out. And walking away is like,
I mean, she's a great collaborator. Like we do have brainstorming meetings and things like that. But initially it's my character, my story, and there are things that I need to kind of figure out for myself. And that's part of the creative process, right? Is like trying things and then it doesn't work and you kind of worry like, oh no, I made a mistake, or I kind of went down the wrong path. But in hindsight, you realize like those missteps led you to something better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned that you had to go back to your sketch pad. I'm curious, as you're creating these stories, as you're creating Otter, is the story coming to you in images or words?
A little bit of both. And I think that's why the comics medium works so well for me as a storyteller, because, my sketchbook is filled with words and pictures. And I show that to kids when I go to school visits, that we all kind of think in different ways. Some of us might think, I ask kids, like, raise your hand if when you think like kind of words pop into your head, and some raise their hand, and raise your hand if pictures pop into your head, and some will raise their hand, and then raise your hand if words and pictures pop into your head. So the latter is me. Like I definitely think in both ways, and that's where my sketchbook holds all of those thoughts and images, and then they kind of just start piecing together.
Yeah. When did you start realizing that that's the way you think and then that's different than the way other people think?
A good question. I mean, ever since I was really little, I loved to draw, and that was how I communicated and had fun. And I was lucky that my mom encouraged me to continue doing that. And I had, teachers throughout elementary school onward that saw something in my drawings and would, compliment them or, smile or want to keep the drawing. So that just kept me going. I think, I don't think I really maybe realized it till I was an adult and really, gave more thought to my process and how I work and finding other people like me who work in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did your creative process or did something change when you became aware of how you were thinking? Did the world look different to you?
Not necessarily, but it was interesting because ever since I was little, I wanted to work in the arts. And when I was really little, back then the Disney Channel would show behind the scenes from like the 50s and of how Disney movies were made. And I was really fascinated with that. And so ever since I was little, I thought, I want to work in animation. I want to do that. And so all the way up through college, that's kind of where I thought I was headed. I wanted to be a story artist where I could create stories, for animation. And then, once I started working in animation, just like the demands of the industry and the culture of, very long work days, just didn't fit my personality. And so I went back to the classroom, and worked as an elementary school teacher for a long time. And so that's when I started thinking, well, maybe I can illustrate children's books, because I kind of reconnected with books and how much I still have a lot of the picture books that I read as a kid, like the original copies. So those are really dear to me. And so for a while I was teaching, I was working on putting together like an illustration portfolio and picture book dummy. And it wasn't till quite a few years later as a teacher, I was acquiring comics from my classroom library, trying to diversify my library every year, having a new goal. And so that particular year, comics were starting to come out. This was maybe about 10 or so years ago, where comics were becoming more prevalent in children's publishing. So I would always read the books before selecting them for my library. And I thought, I remember back in college, just for fun, I would doodle little comics in my sketchbook, but never really considered myself a cartoonist or thought about pursuing comics. So I just started kind of doing that again as an exercise, and something there clicked in my process, and people really responded to the comics that I had made. And so I think then things started coming together for me, and I realized, this suits the way that I think and then the way that I communicate stories.
Yeah. Telling a story in a graphic novel is kind of, although it's the same pictures and words in the illustration, it's different than comics in that most comics are told in 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 panels. And in a graphic novel, you're talking a whole lot more.
Yeah, a comic strip compared to a graphic novel. Yeah, absolutely. And so when I started making comics, I was making comic strips just because they're short and I was teaching full time. And so that was something that I was able to squeeze into my schedule, is to like do a little fun comic. And that's how my first published book, Reggie, initially started as just me having fun making these little 4-panel comics. But then, once I got a contract to make a book about Reggie, I had to sort of really think about, how do I approach this? It was intimidating at first because I was used to telling a little moment in 4 boxes. And now it's like, okay, you have like pages on pages, and there's different ways that you can lay out. So for that, when I was initially getting into comics, I read Scott McCloud's books, like for tutorials about making comics, and then just following a lot of comics artists and reading a lot of comic books and seeing how they make comics was really helpful for me to try to figure that out, because it was very overwhelming. How do you decide to show this on a page and then page after page? Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly I imagine, if you're used to telling a story in 4 panels and now you have 100 or 150 panels to tell the story, it's like, where am I going to get all those words from?
Yeah. Yeah. And the nice thing about Reggie was that Reggie initially started as a comic strip. So by nature, it was just these little vignettes. And so the Reggie books are short chapter books. So it's made up of small stories. So that seemed like a natural transition for Reggie. So it's not 80 pages of one continuous narrative. Pippin Pal's Otter Space is a continuous story from page 1 all the way to page 76 or whatever it is. And so that for me was a new challenge too, thinking, okay, you have 76 pages to fill. How are you going to do that? And yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but it was fun. It was a new thing for me because Pip is an ensemble. She's with other animal friends, and each thing kind of comic strip, short chapters, a full graphic novel, longer graphic novels, middle grade, 200 plus page graphic novels. They all have challenges, and then they all kind of have things that free you a little bit or give you like an opportunity to do something different.
Yeah. Any desire to stretch and maybe do a YA graphic novel?
I'm not sure about YA yet, but right now I am working on my first middle grade series that'll be out in a few years. So so that I'm continuing to push myself and challenge myself and sometimes frustrate myself. But this next series will be just about 200 pages per book. So so that's definitely been stretching me in many ways.
You know, I'm just doing math real quick. If you have 6 panels on a page and you're doing 200 pages, there's a whole lot of illustrations going on. Do you ever get to the point where you're on illustration number 576 and say, I got another 600 of these? I have to get tired of drawing this character.
Yeah, it's funny because now in hindsight, I'm working on the thumbnail sketches. So like the preliminary sketches for this new series, Nummy Chums, which is like a 200 page book. And so I think just about went over the 150 page mark, which is essentially 2 Pip books, or a Pip and a Reggie. So yeah, now looking back, it's like, oh, an 80 page book really wasn't as bad as I thought.
How do you, I know in the creative process, there are folks who outline everything, and then there are folks seat of the pants kind of pantsers. I hear that. What about for you as you're creating a graphic novel? Are you kind of outlining all the different images in your mind, or are you writing it down, or are you going from the seat of your pants?
Definitely not a seat of my pants type of person. I do think in college I took a screenwriting class, and it was extremely helpful for me, not only for writing character dialogue, which you use a lot in comics, but just understanding how important an outline is and knowing where you're going. And those things can change and will change organically as you're creating. But I think it's really important to know how your character's changing, what they're pursuing, what kind of goal they're after, to have that in mind. So yes, I do start with an outline and then kind of break it down from there into smaller moments, but it's not so tight because once you start creating in images, you start to think about what is necessary and not necessary. So sometimes I'll have dialogue that I thought was necessary when I was scripting or outlining, and then I realized that visually the image takes care of that, and it's kind of redundant to have the text. So I'll kind of eliminate or change things while I'm working, but pretty much sticking to that outline keeps me on track.
Yeah. Have you ever had the experience where you're drawing a character and it's going well, but then one day you just get a bolt of inspiration and you change the character and you're like, oh, this is how the character should look. Oh, but I have to go back and change all the work I've already done.
I think, the funny thing about comics, or maybe not funny, but you end up drawing the book so many times by the time it's a final illustration. So my process is starting with the thumbnail sketches, which are very rough, like stick figure kind of level. And then once those are all, that's where I like to get most of the planning done and my editorial feedback, because things are so sketchy and loose and rough that it doesn't take too much time to go back and redraw them. Once you get to, like you're saying, like all of these final drawings, that's kind of a nightmare to have to think to go back and to change things, make major revisions. So as much as you can in the early process, the early phase, I think it's important to try to nail down those changes. With Pip, though, when I first created the character, because, I went to aquariums and observed otters and then read books about otters and watched videos of otters, and they tend to have a very cylindrical shape. And so Pip looked like a hot dog, basically a hot dog with little tiny arms and legs. And so once I started thumbnailing these loose sketches of Pip, I realized like I couldn't make her as expressive as I wanted, because she was essentially just this tube with teeny little limbs. And I couldn't pose her in different ways. So that's when her shape changed, and she looks now kind of like a big oval head and a smaller body and longer arms. So yeah, definitely, I think as you're drawing, you definitely notice things that need to change, but hopefully you have that figured out before you get, 200 pages in.
One of the things one of the mistakes that I made when my son was growing up and loving graphic novels and anime, and I supported it. I took him to the comic store on Free Comic Day and other days and brought it home when I'm on the road. But I didn't appreciate the fact that he was reading when he was reading these comics, and would oftentimes go in his room and say, "Man, dude, can you just read one book without a picture in it? What do you think? You're in high school now." I didn't realize that graphic novels it's story, it's literature, and the kids who are reading graphic novels are reading. Talk as a teacher, former teacher, can you talk a little bit about the value of graphic novels and help parents not make the same mistake I made?
Yeah, I mean, I think, because when we go back to when we were kids and how we were introduced to books, and for me, comics were not as accessible. I saw them in the funny pages of the newspaper, but I didn't have a local comic shop. So I had friends that did. So it kind of, our experience as kids vary based on where you lived, how accessible comics and comic books were. But I would say essentially in the classroom, we were taught like you have picture books in early elementary, and then you graduate into chapter books, and then you eventually graduate into books that are all text and no pictures. And I think we need to just kind of reframe how we think about reading and how we're consuming reading and what reading is. And when I was an elementary teacher, I taught first grade for a lot of years. So we're really teaching the foundation of reading and the building blocks of reading. And something that I would start out the year with was something that I had read in one of my, like not a teaching manual, but like a guide book of teaching reading to kids. And it was the phrase, reading is thinking. And so when you frame it like that, if you're getting something from the text or the images and you're synthesizing this and you're processing the information, you're comprehending, that's the most important part about reading, is making meaning from what you're taking in. And I remember reading things saying, like, if you have a kindergartner or preschooler, like, let them read whatever they want to read. If they're looking at a cereal box, just having that desire to read and take in information is so important. And I think it's important as adults to just be open-minded and encouraging, because if a kid wants to read, that's the goal, right? We want them to love reading. We want them to grab books. We want them to want to explore and discover more. So doing that without judgment, I think. And something one of my cartoonist friends, who's also a literature professor, Jared Roseo, said once when we were just chatting, that stuck with me, is you never know what a reader is going to take away from something they're reading. And I think that's really important too, because everyone is an individual. We all have different experiences and think differently. So, I hand you a comic. I don't know what that's going to mean to you or what you're going to take away from it. I hand that same comic to different people. Everyone's going to kind of connect to it differently. So yeah. And I think now, because things are so visual, in our society, in our world. Comics are really great for that visual literacy, like understanding how to read pictures and take information away from pictures. And for people who maybe are a little lack exposure to comics or feel like a little judgmental about comics, I would just say, think about any time you've had like a furniture manual or some kind of manual, even like a Legos or something, and imagine that entire manual being text. How like overwhelming and awful that would be. And maybe you wouldn't even put the thing together right because it would be so frustrating. Like, what's the tube? What's part A? What? I don't understand. But when you have images to accompany those words, you can understand it so much better. And I think comics is very similar to that, using words and pictures to make meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, when I get those instructions from IKEA, I just call someone, hey, can you come over and help?
Well, I don't know if they're in Swedish. That maybe wouldn't help. But
tell me, what kind of conversations do you think families can have? Because we talk about this with the text novels that we celebrate here on the podcast. Pip and Pal's Otter Space. It's a neat title. What kind of conversations do you think, if a family is co-reading the book together, what can they be talking about?
Oh, I love that question. So, I mean, obviously from the title, it's a silly book. Pip is an otter who suddenly turns green and everyone's convinced she's an otter, a space otter. But beneath that, there's a layer of Pip questioning her identity and if she belongs and where she belongs and where home is. Like, is this beach area her home, or is there a home planet she's supposed to go to? And her friends are here. So I think that's definitely something that I hope comes up with readers, that I think they could read and say, how do you think Pip is feeling? Or have you ever felt like that like you don't maybe fit in, or, things like that? Or I think at least if it doesn't facilitate a discussion, I think people will connect to that emotional aspect of maybe not being sure of your place or fitting in, and also leaning on others when you feel that way, having a community or friends to support you when you're not feeling certain about things.
Yeah. I love that idea of talking to our kids about community and who we choose to be in our community, who we choose to be in our family. Those are some really important conversations.
Yeah, there's a line that I really like that stayed, and I tried in my writing. Part of that is my training from screenwriting, not to be too on the nose, too explicit, being able to imply meaning without being too direct. But there's a line in the book where Pip isn't sure if she should go to a home planet because this is her home. And Herman, the hermit crab, says, more than one place can be home. And I'm glad that stayed in the book because as a teacher, I've worked with so many different families that maybe have different homes, like us. You have mom and dad are divorced in different homes. Maybe you have family here and then family in another country. And both of those places can be your home. Or maybe you spend time in one house and then you're at grandma and grandpa's a lot. So I think that's something that I hope readers will connect to as well. It's like, what is home? What does that mean? And is it the same for everybody? I don't think it is.
Yeah. I love it. Great conversations. Tell everybody, please, where they can go to find out more about Pip and Pal's Otter Space and find out more about you.
My website is Jen Deo Art. So Jen, JenDeo Art, ART.com. I'm also Jen Deo Art on Instagram. And yeah, you can find more about my books and, all kinds of things there. You go to the website. I like to have a lot of little, like, how to draw and different activities too that families can use. So I'll be definitely adding there's some things there from my first books, my first series, Reggie, but I'll definitely be adding some interactive and fun things for Pip soon because the book's coming out in July.
Excellent. We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Pip and Pal's Otter Space. Our guest has been Jen De Oliveira. Hey, Jen, thanks so much for being back with us on Reading with Your Kids.
I had fun chatting. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Hey, my friends, if you are like so many people I know, one of the favorite parts of your morning is that first quiet cup of coffee before the day gets rolling. And recently, I discovered a company I think a whole lot of our Reading with Your Kids family, you're just going to love it. It's called Afuera Coffee Company. What really caught my attention is that Afuera works directly with local farmers in Central and South America, especially in El Salvador, a nation I adore. And all their beans come from certified Rainforest Alliance farms. So you're not just getting incredible coffee, you're supporting ethical farming and environmental conservation too. And friends, this is not ordinary supermarket coffee. These are specialty, hand-selected beans grown in rich volcanic soil. And you can taste the difference. Smooth, rich, aromatic. Whether you love a bold espresso or a lighter roast, they really do have something for every coffee lover. Another thing I love, their packaging is compostable or recyclable, and 5% of every sale goes to charities that help preserve the great outdoors. Because they're sponsoring Reading with Your Kids, I arranged an exclusive 15% discount for our listeners. Just head on over to afueracoffee.com and use the promo code READ at checkout. And yes, when you use that code, you're also helping support the podcast. So great coffee, helping farmers, helping the planet, helping Reading with Your Kids. That's a pretty magical combination right there. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is sponsored by Ramble Office. You know, before I tell you about Ramble Office, let me tell you about what travel used to look like for me. When I take the Reading with Your Kids studio on the road, it was like a lot. I had one box for the mixer, another case for microphones, a satchel for my laptop, cables everywhere. And I always felt like I was forgetting something. That's why Ramble Office really clicked with me. Rambo takes everything I used to juggle, tech gear, personal stuff, and puts it into one smart, great-looking unit that's designed to be a mobile office, not just luggage. Everything has a place. Everything stays protected. And when you get to where you're going, you're ready to work. Instead of digging through bags or repacking your life every time you move, Rambo keeps your setup organized and ready to deploy. Travel days stop being chaos and start being productive. It's sleek, modern, built for people whose work doesn't stop just because they're on the move. And if your job follows you, whether that's podcasting, teaching, consulting, or creating, Ramble is worth a look. Go to rambleofficeanywhere.com, all one word, rambleofficeanywhere.com. Use the promo code READ, R-E-A-D, and receive 5% off any product. It's exclusive for Reading with Your Kids listeners. Check it out today, rambleofficeanywhere.com, promo code READ. Join us right now from the beautiful state of South Carolina. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new middle grade novel. It's called Aiken's River Rat. Please welcome to the show, Melanie Paget. Melanie, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today.
Delighted to have you on. What an interesting title, Aiken's River Rat. Who's Aiken and who is this river rat?
Well, Aiken is the town of Aiken, South Carolina. Okay. And a river rat is someone who loves to be out on the river. Our state of South Carolina has wonderful waterways here. We have the Great and the Little PD and Lynch's River. We have the Savannah River that goes through Augusta, Georgia, and Aiken, South Carolina. And so there's a lot to do on the river here in our wonderful state. And so a river rat is that kind of person that enjoys being on the river.
Well, you know, as somebody, I did educational magic shows for 35 years. And while most of my shows were up in the Northeast, between Boston and Washington, D.C., I did travel around the country and many times traveled alongside the Little PD River on my way down to Florida or Georgia. I do have to say, South Carolina is the only state on the East Coast that I didn't have a chance to perform in. But I did, like I said, I did drive through and spent a couple of nights there and always found that the name, the Little PD River, that's an interesting name for a river.
Oh, yes. PD is the area that where the river is, and it's around the middle of South Carolina. You have the Gulf Coast, which is the coastal plains, and then you have the middle of the state where you have Columbia and the more flatlands, and then you have the upstate with the foothills and the mountains. So it's a beautiful combination of everything you would like to do outdoors.
What is your favorite thing to do outdoors?
Well, I learned I definitely like to go to the beach. We're about an hour, maybe a little over an hour right here from Myrtle Beach where I live. So most of the people in this area, especially right now, this time of year, are going to be at the beach somewhere. And I'm no different. I love being out there taking walks and finding seashells and just feeling the wonderful wind. But also it's just a great place to think and write and meditate and all the things that I just enjoy doing.
Yeah. So in your middle grade novel, we have someone who loves the river. Who is this? Who's this person who loves the river?
Well, the little fella, he's 12 years old, and his name is Adrian, and he loves to spend time with his grandfather. He calls him Pawpaw, and so him and his Pawpaw go out to the river. They cruise the river. They love to be outside hunting. They love to be outside, really doing anything where they can fish. They look at nature. The beauty of South Carolina in this book is really described through Adrian's adventures with his pawpaw.
One of the things we love celebrating here on the podcast is intergenerational friendships. I've mentioned many times in the show, my grandmother was one of my best friends growing up. She would ride in the back of my motorcycle, and we'd go to see professional wrestling together and have all sorts of great times together. I think it's a really, whether it's a grandparent or an uncle or just a mentor, just a valued mentor. I think that those relationships can be so very important. And I love celebrating books that celebrate those relationships.
Oh, yeah. And Adrian also, he loves to be with his family. You know, the beginning of the book, they're headed for Christmas break. They're headed to Pawpaw's house. It's time to be with his cousins. So there's some adventures there with his cousins. His grandfather has rentals all in the area. He's got a bunch of land out in the area of Aiken. And so he rents these mobile homes, and he's like a handyman, fixer-upper type guy. And so Adrian goes around with his pawpaw, helping him fix up these rentals. They, whether they need a paint job or just little fixer-uppers here and there. And so you go along with him on those adventures with his cousins, and you get their story of growing up in that area, in that time area. It takes place in the 70s, and it's just a time when things are very simple. They're doing everything from picking up pecans from the pecan trees to painting the old shed to lighting firecrackers, but the main thing they love to do is getting out on the waterways and going fishing, hunting, and canoeing.
Yeah. What is it? Why did you choose that time period, the 70s?
Well, the main reason is because my late husband is from that area, and we used to travel for about 10 years up and down I-20. I'm from Georgia originally, and so we would travel from Georgia to South Carolina, up and down I-20, and he would tell me these childhood stories with just such vivid detail. And so I would write them down. I would jot down little things here and there because I love to write, and he knows that. He knows I have a passion for writing. And so his detail was just incredible of his love for his grandfather. So that's where the story is based on, the real life story of my late husband and his escapades with these cousins and his grandfather. And so I had to do a little research of quite a bit of the cousins. And so I interviewed them as a part of the getting this story written and, in its full embodiment. And I tell you what, those stories just came alive. They could not believe that Vaughn had remembered such detail. And so it was so much fun interviewing the cousins, getting prepared to write this book. The stories just were richer than even I could imagine. I said, was it really true that he washed his hair outside in the water hose and things like that? And the old Cutlass was the car is a part of the book, the car that their pawpaw drove, and they would just laugh and laugh and so their memories, it was just so much fun listening to them too and reliving those days. And so that was what was the original design for writing the book, was to bring alive back those memories, that shared experience of family, and then also to really showcase the beauty of the natural outdoors of South Carolina. The book meets some of the education criteria, the pacing guide of standards. So any classroom teacher could have this right in her classroom to teach the history of South Carolina, the science, especially life science of South Carolina right now in the classroom. And it's just a fun way of other 12 to 13-year-olds. I would say even a good second grader could read this book. It's a chapter book, and they can really gain some wonderful knowledge about their own state of South Carolina.
Yeah. I have to tell you, Melanie, I'm not sure how I feel about someone referring to the time of my life when I was in high school as history, but I suppose it's appropriate. I'm curious. You mentioned having fun speaking to your husband's cousins and whatnot. Did you feel that your husband was kind of like your co-author as you were creating this book?
Oh, absolutely. He was also the biggest encourager of my writing, because like I had told you earlier, I've been an educator for almost 40 years. And so I've written and taught reading and, writing as an advocate, as a teacher, an advocate for families. Well, now, and I've always journaled and jotted down, different things from my family, and especially somebody like my late husband, who was just so excited telling these stories. And I thought, these stories are too wonderful to just pack up and put away in a drawer. And so my goal in this book was to take those stories and bring them as up to date as I could with South Carolina's beauty and South Carolina's wonder, that really any 12-year-old boy or girl, elementary to middle school, could pick up this book and without even realize how much they're learning of the beauty and wonder of their own state, could go on a true adventure and be right there on the water, with Adrian and his pawpaw.
Yeah. You mentioning kids in South Carolina being able to learn about their state and the nature. And one of the things we love to celebrate is the fact that books can be a mirror, a window, and a sliding glass door. So that Aiken's River Rat can be a mirror for kids in Aiken and other parts of South Carolina is fantastic. But I love the fact that Aiken's River Rat can also be a window to allow kids in the rest of the country and around the world a chance to see not only the beauty of South Carolina, but also get a feel for what life was like when their grandparents or parents may have been in school.
Absolutely. There's also a section about the music that was played in that time period. Vaughn loved music, and so did his cousins. And so they were listening to the music of that era. And so, music is always trending. And the music in the 70s was no different. And so it's bringing back the nostalgia of these popular singers, these popular song groups, and to watch or to read Adrian, listening to music with his papa and with his cousins are the very same things that families do today, to have fun together, to have shared experience together, whether they're doing something outdoors or whether they're cooking together or whether they're, dancing and listening to music and enjoying the musical times. All of those things are just wonderful ways to get families together,
Yeah.
talking about things. And then you see the multi-generational of his pawpaw talking about the music of today and then telling them about the music of his day.
Yeah.
And they're listening to those stories of their pawpaw. And so it just, it's that mutual respect of the trends of the day, but also the respect of the trends of their grandfather's day too.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm curious to see if your husband was listening to the same kind of music I was listening to in the 70s. I have a feeling that Boston, South Carolina had different tastes. What were some of your husband's favorite artists?
Okay, well, I tell you, they loved I was trying to look up some of them. I had written some of them down. The Monkees,
Okay.
the Beatles, the Supremes, John Lennon, Paul McCartney
Okay.
was a big one. The Mamas and the Papas. Those were the main ones that when I did the interview and were some of their favorites.
All right. Well, so they were Southern hippies. That's good. I love it. I can relate.
Definitely.
One of the things, Melanie, that I feel bad about kids these days because it's a kind of yin yang thing. On the one hand, kids have access to every kind of music in the world, so they don't have to wait by the radio to hear their pop song, their favorite song come on. They can just play it. But at the same time, that means that they're not being exposed to other types of music, so a lot of kids these days, while they might know, their favorite artist and their best friend's favorite artist, they probably haven't heard their parents' music, or they haven't heard their grandparents' music like you and I did when we were growing up, when we had to have more shared listening and watching experiences.
Oh, yeah. And see, there's a section in chapter 2 where Vaughn's mother, in fact, he's named after the singer Vaughn Monroe, and his mother is carrying this album around, and she's playing this music of Vaughn Monroe. He wakes up to it, and she's just dancing around the living room, and he's like, oh my goodness, there she goes again, just swooning over Vaughn Monroe. I don't know what she thinks he's so great, about. And so he's a 12-year-old little boy watching his mom just swoon over this singer. And so to me, that's just her display of her love for this singer is no different than a 16-year-old today or a 20-year-old or whatever, when they're at a concert and they're watching a favorite singer, and they're just swooning over that singer. Those things happen to your grandmothers as well, Yeah. So, and he's like, why is she swooning over him, and then her cousins in the next room playing the Monkees, so I agree with you. It's just the fact that he's seeing it played out, and he's recognizing it, that his mom is just a goner for this, She said, well, I know, he said, she must have liked him a lot because I'm named after him. I just thought that was hilarious. And so it just opens up those conversations for parents or kids that read this book to have those conversations. And, what better time to read than the summer, and to read different types of book. That's the great thing about reading with your kids is it just opens up conversations for perspectives. Yeah. And, what do you think about that? Well, I've never heard of that, and to me, that's one of the biggest pluses about a book like this is just getting, those conversations opened up about it.
Yeah. Well, that's what reading with your kids is all about. We celebrate the conversations that families can have. We celebrate the fact that a kid is much more willing to talk about school bullying when you're talking about a character in a book as opposed to coming home and saying, someone's bothering me, someone's hurting me. It's a lot easier to talk about a kid who's being excluded at school than it is to come home and say, hey, Mom, I don't have any friends. So, we're all about that. The other thing is I know that the relationship I have with my now adult kids was built on a foundation of reading. And that's why I launched the podcast to encourage parents to build those relationships. But I've been delighted to find there are so many more benefits as a veteran educator, somebody who's been educating kids in typical classrooms, but also kids with special challenges. Tell me, please, how important do you think it is for families to read with their kids every day?
Well, one of the main things that reading does is even if a parent is doing the one reading, it's bringing in the whole nature of communication, of how communication works. Whoever is sitting at the table, so if a parent is reading to a child, they're hearing that tone of that mother and that father. They're seeing the body language of the mother and the father. They're listening to those words. Their vocabulary is being built just by it going into their ears. And then as that child reciprocates or says, maybe has a question or just, let's just say they just listen. I know so many times when I was reading to my students and my own children at home, we would read so many books together. They were taking in so much more than I even realized, because later we would have a conversation about it or they would bring it up years later. But especially with young children, even before language starts, that's those building blocks of language and communication is the reciprocity of someone talking and someone listening and then someone making a gesture back. And so that's how important reading is. It really builds all of the intelligences. Yeah. The physical, the emotional, the social, the spiritual, the intelligible. It really feels all of the four intelligences.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Aiken's River Rat and find out more about you.
Okay. Well, all of my books, I have 3 books published out right now. You can find them on all the online platforms, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Walmart. And then also, I have a social media account on Instagram, Melanie Paget, Facebook. You can message me. And then I don't mind giving out my email. You can email me and I'll be glad to get a book. My publisher is Palmetto Publishing. They're a wonderful publisher. They've been with me through all of my publishings, and we can get you a book any of those ways.
Wonderful. We've had a wonderful time speaking to the author of Aiken's River Rat. Our guest has been Melanie Paget. Hey, Melanie, thanks so much for being on Reading with Your Kids, and thanks for teaching for so long.
Thank you, Jed, and I look forward to talking to you soon, and God bless you in your podcast.
That's it for this episode of Reading with Your Kids. We hope you had a fun time, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode of the show. this episode made you smile or gave you something to think about, please consider sharing a link to the show with someone you love. Leave a 5-star review and, of course, subscribe to the show wherever you find your favorite shows. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Jen De Oliveira. Please be sure to check out Pips and Pals Otter Space. Also want to thank Melanie Paget. Please be sure to check out Aiken's River Rat. I want to thank my team, Daylene Rose, Advina Lopez, Chris Doherty, Ella Badier. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the love and support she brings to my life. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better, more empathetic, more kind place. And you do that every single time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.